I'm an artist, and I use technology as an artistic medium to explore how it is that we think about now and the future. I believe that arts practice and technology are a powerful combination because they can help us to explore critical issues like artificial intelligence, global warming, and genetic surveillance. Today, I want to share with you some of my projects, and I want to share some of the projects of a community that's been emerging in New York of artists and technologists who are dealing with these types of issues. To get started, I'm going to tell you about my art practice, and to do that, I'm going to tell you about my health. In 2014, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and that means that I had to start thinking very carefully about my blood glucose levels and injecting insulin very frequently. I started wearing a body sensor which broadcast my blood glucose values over a radio signal to my phone. And I stitched this together with some open source tools called Xtrip and Night Scout, and I was able to get a real-time body feed to this art installation, which is a visualization which represents what those numbers mean to me. Numbers like 91 represent a good and a healthy state. Very low values, like 53, are potentially dangerous, and in this situation I can feel heartbeat, sweating, shaking, and so on. Higher numbers cause a constriction in the flow of the animation. Now, higher values don't cause me any immediate symptoms, but lots of high numbers over time will accrue, and they cause a variety of body-wide complications, including heart attack, stroke, blindness, amputation. The list is long, and the list is very gruesome. So the effect on me is psychological. I spend a lot of energy and time trying to keep the numbers in a healthy range. I know that with this very personal condition that I live with, I have to acknowledge it in order to deal with it, in order to survive. But then I realized all of us collectively have a very similar condition, and it's just as bad, it's just as urgent, and it's just as life-threatening. And that's climate change. I created this installation to help us think about our global reaction to climate change and to compare it to our personal reactions when we're diagnosed with chronic illnesses ourselves. There's something about how big and how all-encompassing climate change is where we say, yes, it's urgent, yes, it's existential, but then we allow it to slip down in our priority list. I and people with diabetes, we respond differently. We want to learn about it, we want to act on it, and we want to put it very high on the list. The American Diabetes Association publishes this graphic on their website, and it's designed to help newly diagnosed people think about their options going forward. It charts the path of two fictional characters, Anna and Mary, throughout their lives. And the colored dots represent the sense of fear and of shock and of anger and of stress, whereas the white dots represent a sense of control. You can see how these things change over time for the two characters. The key insight is if, like Mary, you acknowledge the condition early, if you front-load your engagement with the treatment before the major symptoms start to show, then there's good news. You can live a long and a healthy life. It's actually a highly positive message because it shows that you can take looming existential threats that are actually very scary and you can take control of them and you can turn them into dust. I want you to imagine for a moment that you have been diagnosed with diabetes and that you have been handed this chart. How long would you wait to start treatment? 1 year? 2 years? Would you begin immediately? How many hours of your day would you spend on managing the condition? How much money would you spend? Where would it sit on your priority list? So here's the thing. If you take global climate change, that situation overlays exactly onto this chart. And we as a species are already halfway down on Anna's trajectory. There is still time. We could make a positive leap over to Mary's trajectory, but we need a big push from all of us to make something like that happen, and we would need it very, very quickly. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm using art and technology to explore what the future holds and to look at how we think about the future. I first moved to New York in 2012, and one of the first works I made was an audiovisual installation called Long. So in this work, I'm using projection to look at our perception of nature, and in this case of rocks. And I'm asking, can we modify our fundamental conceptions of these objects that we would normally consider to be lifeless and bring a sense of agency and movement? This clip of the process behind that shows that I'm drawing light directly onto the rocks. And for me, this is an early example of me using art and technology to think about our perceptions of the world. In this next project, I'm exploring depth video, and this is an incredible technology because you can shoot scenes from one position and then you can re-render the scene from any other position, including from behind a wall. This was shot in the winding tunnels of the London Underground, and here we can see that I'm using art and technology to explore how we conceive of the built urban environment of mass cities, and to think about this paradox of how being surrounded by millions of people can actually still be very isolating. It was while I was working on that project that I met the artist and curator Ellen Perlman, and she was studying the same depth technology, and we started running these workshops and events together to support the community that built around it. Ellen then came and helped us out to build a vibrant community around the Hardware Hack Lab, which is a weekly meetup run out of the New York office of a global technology consultancy called ThoughtWorks. The lab provides community access to hardware, including virtual reality, body sensors, electronics equipment, and so on. And this has become a hub in New York for creative collaboration. Following on from that, we founded Art2Hack, and this was Ellen's idea of a program where we curate teams based on an open call for applications, and then we match people together with mixed disciplines, and then we incubate art-led explorations into various emerging technologies. Again, this is run out of ThoughtWorks New York, and it's done in collaboration with a number of other institutions, like New York University, the Metropolitan Museums, Media Lab, Microsoft, and others. Our alumni from this program have gone on to show work at MoMA, and at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I'm not kidding here, at the North Pole. Ellen has made her own arts practice, and she's looked in detail at brain-computer interface, which is headsets that can read your brain state. Ellen went on to develop the world's first brain opera at a 360-degree theater in Hong Kong. In the opera, a performer wears a brain-computer headset and it reads her emotional state. Those emotions drive the colors and the sounds and the videos that the audience experience. Noor is the name of a female British secret agent who was dropped behind enemy lines during World War II until she was captured, imprisoned, and executed. She was very successful at relaying messages back to Britain. By telling the story through the lens of World War II, Ellen's asking us to think about the possibilities when this type of technology gets into the hands of authoritarian regimes. She's asking, is there a place in human consciousness where surveillance cannot go? So this is another example of art and technology questioning and critiquing a trajectory that we're on. And you can see this with my practice, and with Ellen's practice, and with the community programs, Art2Hack and Hardware Hack Lab. Then Ellen and I got together and we decided to take it one step further. We created a funded arts residency based out of ThoughtWorks, which supports artists who are working with emerging technologies and looking at the implications of those technologies for society. You see, I and many technologists at ThoughtWorks are thinking very deeply about these types of issues and about the future of technology and society. And with a residency, we could now go much deeper, and we could have collaborations between artists and the designers and the developers at ThoughtWorks. The first residents we worked with were the Cyborg Foundation, and this is Neil Harbison and Moon Rebus. Their work is about transhumanism, and this is the augmentation of human capabilities with emerging technologies. Neil is known for a surgical implant in his head, and it's an antenna which allows him to hear colors as sound. He has a camera at the front of that antenna, and the color frequencies from that camera are translated into audio frequencies which he can hear. Moon Rebus has an implant in her arm, and this allows her to feel whenever there's seismic activity anywhere in the world. She's a dancer and a choreographer, and she uses that sensation in her performances. One of the key insights of the Cyborg Foundation is that permanent implants, or permanently worn wearables, in effect become new human senses. Over time, the psychology of the wearer adapts to the incoming data stream, which is always on. And this becomes another sense, just like sight and sound and smell and so on. I and the engineers from this community and the ThoughtWorks employees collaborated with the cyborgs on the development of 2 new senses. With Neil, we created a time sense, which allows him to perceive the 24-hour clock around the circumference of his head. What he wants to do is to develop his psychological awareness of this sense and make it part of his internal experience, and then to adapt and to move his sensation of time so that it goes faster and it goes slower. Moon has created a new version of her seismic sense, and this one allows her to geolocate tremors so that she can sense where they are in the world. And this is something that's going to give her a chance to become much more in sync with the movements of the planet. The futures suggested by this work are startling. With an internet-enabled sense, like Moon's seismic sense, any data feed from the internet can potentially become your internalized bodily sensation. What are the implications of that? As our children grow up in a world where these types of augmentations are available to those that can afford it, and providing advantages to those that can afford it, what are going to be the social pressures or the work pressures to conform towards cyborgism? Again, this is an example of arts practice which provokes thought and dialogue about an emerging future. Our next arts resident was Heather Dewey-Hagborg, and she's known for collecting discarded gum and cigarette butts and extracting DNA from them. She takes them to a gene sequencing lab, and she 3D prints faces based on the traits from that DNA. You can see some examples in a gallery setting up here. During the residency, Heather collaborated with the then incarcerated whistleblower Chelsea Manning and with the ThoughtWorks designer Shoili Kanungo. And she produced this comic book, which helps bring this very important conversation towards a general audience. What's fascinating here is that shortly after Heather started printing these faces, an industry emerged around it, and vendors started offering this as a service. If you give me some DNA, I'll give you a face. DNA analysis is getting cheaper all of the time, and everywhere we go, we leave a trail of DNA. And so this raises interesting questions about genetic privacy and genetic surveillance. And also about bias. The artificial intelligence systems used to generate these faces are trained on datasets related to human conventions about race, gender, and identity, not scientific models. And this is how artificial intelligence works. It learns about how humans do things, and then it mimics that. That's being alluded to in the second pane here, and artificial intelligence like this is being rolled out across society right now, and it's making consequential decisions for people's lives, including things like loan applications or criminal sentencing. There's significant evidence that these systems are often learning and automating human biases in algorithmic form at scale. And that's something that the designers and the users of these systems don't actually intend, but it is happening in practice. And that's why with the arts residency we have an open call out right now for an artist that wants to go deeper into the biases of artificial intelligence during the fall of 2017. Once again, with Heather's work and with the residency generally, we see art practice and technology tools helping to critique an emerging future. As an artist myself, looking at personal health and at climate change, and as a director of these programs, I know that looking into the future can be scary. There are all these unknowns, and there are all these risks. But this is somewhere where art can step in, and it can help us in an entirely unique way. Whether it's climate change, or cyborgism, or biased AI, or DNA, or brain surveillance, artists are helping us go deep with these issues and to see them in a new light, and to understand these amazing new ideas in a tangible way right in front of us. This helps us to see and discuss the risks and the opportunities and to put them into context. And that enables us to take control of very difficult issues. So this is why I believe that bringing arts practice much deeper into technology is going to be crucial for the 21st century. Thank you.